August 24th, 2005, item number 79. Today's guest is Chuck from the Chuck Chat Podcasts.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 podcast. Before we get into the interview with Chuck, a couple quick news and notes. First up, I want to play some feedback received from Chris from the Financial Aid Podcast with regards to the PodSafe Music Network. Here's Chris.
Hi, Rob. This is Chris from the Financial Aid Podcast, financialaidpodcast.com, with some audio feedback revolving around the PodSafe Music Network tech tip you just had on your show. When it comes to downloading MP3s from the PodSafe Music Network, I used to do it the old-fashioned way, download each file individually and try and manage it, but I found that was a big pain in the butt. However, there is an XML link at the bottom of your podcaster page that allows you to subscribe to your PodSafe Music queue. It'll download all of your MP3s into your podcatcher, mine is iTunes, and then from there you can drag and drop your MP3s straight into your podcast, saving a tremendous amount of time. So instead of having to download it individually, just subscribe to your podcast feed. Hope this was helpful. Talk to you soon, and keep up the great work, Rob. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chris, for the feedback. And of course, if anyone out there has any feedback on anything that's been said on the show or you think should be said on the show, please send that feedback to podcast411@gmail.com. Thanks again, Chris. This podcast and intro and outro were recorded on Wednesday, August 24th, which is the day Google released Google Talk. And I'm sure many of you have already seen messages or heard about this, and you're probably wondering, how does that apply to podcasting? In a quick nutshell summary, it doesn't. And let me explain why. Google Talk, while it will allow you to IM, instant message, between iChat and PSI and Trillion Pro and GAIM, it does not allow you to voice communicate with anything other than Google Talk. And Google Talk was only released on the PC. In the podcasting world, what does that mean? Well, to give you some stats, this is our 79th interview. If I look back at the last 40 interviews, 19 of the last 40 interviews were people running OS X. Overall, the statistics are running around the same number. For the 79 interviews, over 45% of the people I've interviewed have been on OS X. And that's a random sampling. I've gone out and looked for people not because I knew what platform they were on, but because of their podcast. Statistically, I think that's a significant number. To be conservative, I'll say at least 35% of all podcasters today are on Mac OS X, although I believe the number to be above 40%. But regardless of what the number is, Google Talk is no more significant to podcasting than iChat is. If you cannot talk with the other half of the podcasting community, then that tool is not a valid tool for podcasting. So until someone can figure out how to make iChat and Google Talk voice communicate with one another, I consider Google Talk a non-entity in the podcasting world. Now that's not to say it's not a nice IM program, and if you're on Windows, you shouldn't go and get it. By all means, go out and get it. But if you think Google Talk has any relevance in podcasting, today, in my humble opinion, it does not. That's going to do it for the news and notes today. We're going to go ahead and get into our interview with Chuck from the Chuck Chat Podcasts. Here we go.
This is Chuck Tomasi from ChuckChat.com, home of the two Chuck Chat podcasts. Yes, two podcasts for the price of one. Chuck Chat Technorama is done twice a week with my co-host Craig Stepp. With Technorama, you get some true grit tech. We dig deep and explore some really geeky stuff. The other show is Chuck Chat Freestyle. My two daughters and even my wife join me from time to time for some stories, RIA-free music, podcaster profiles, and of course, the audio What's It quiz. Give us a listen at www.chuckchat.com. See you there.
Chuck, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
And I'll start you out with the traditional first question, and that is, what was your first computer?
First one I owned is a rather strange beast called a WorkSlate from Convergent Technologies. It's a little smaller than most standard laptops right now. It's got a strange 43-column display, LCD. The keyboard absolutely sucks on it, but if you can type 40 words a minute on that keyboard, you can type 120 on any standard keyboard. It's got a little cassette, built-in modem, very useful tool. In fact, I'm actually thinking of redeploying the thing to start recording live phone calls from the public service telephone network.
120 words per minute, they just caught me. I'm thinking, okay, could I type 120 words per minute? Yeah, the word was A and I.
It's a handy little device. I got it actually free because my boss couldn't afford to pay me for the first 2 months. So he said, here, take one of these. We're not selling them anyway. That launched my interest in electronic bulletin boards, which I used to dial up on this thing all the time. That turned into a career in computers, really. So this little device has had a lot of miles on it.
What was the first podcast you listened to?
First podcast I listened to was actually... it's a long story, so I'll make it short. I listened to Ken Radio with Ken Rakowski back in the early days of Real Player when they had a channel called Tech Talk. He used to do it with a co-host named Jeff Yablon, and it evolved from there to listening to him a daily download from kenradio.com. He has a lot of tech news. I was very interested in that. Long about, I think it was October, November, he mentioned, hey, those guys over at Engadget, they're not too bad. And I said, well, what is this all about? Someone else has a tech show that I'm not listening to. I went over to Engadget and read the article on podcasting, downloaded iPod X, started looking for geek stuff. I found Todd Cochran's Geek News Central. Kevin Devin was doing In the Trenches back then. I got hooked. I heard it and I said, first of all, I've always wanted to do this. Second of all, this is just geeky enough that I just need a few tweaks to the software I wrote to put an enclosure tag in the RSS feed. And third, I could contribute back to these guys, because when Kevin would do his tech chats on the weekend, I would be shouting back to him going, no, Internet Explorer is over here and do this. And when I found myself talking back, I said, I've just got to get a microphone and do this myself.
Now, outside of tech podcast network shows, what other podcasts are you listening to?
Well, probably one at the top of my list is the Richard Vobes radio show. Love the British humor, always have. I'm an old Monty Python fan from way back when. I listen to the One Source podcast with Jeff Curvin, 5 Minutes with Wichita. I think you're the one who turned me on to that one not too long ago, and love the show. That is a good one. Dragon Page, they've got 3 shows, cover to cover, Winging It, and Slice of Sci-Fi.
Yeah, Evo does a good job over there, Evo and Mike.
Evo and Mike, I spoke with both of them and had wonderful conversations with both of them. Glastonbury podcast with Mel Telford, I believe his name is. How to Do Stuff podcast. Jimmy Jett. Mostly Trivial with Johnny B. Podcast Brothers. Podcast Paul. Your Show. Really learned Spanish, although he hasn't had any content out lately. I'd like to keep going with that one. Rev Tim. Science at NASA. Slacker Astronomy. Radio Adventures of Dr. Floyd.
Now, your daughter seems to like Dr. Floyd, too. I heard her in that one.
Oh, my daughter loves Dr. Floyd. That is a weekly event when I pick them up from daycare. I make sure I save that for the ride home because they're hanging on the edge of their seat as they go from episode to episode. And then there's Morning Stories and Winecast. Finishes out the list.
Let's tell our listeners about your different podcasts, the shows you have, Freestyle and Technorama, and set up what they're going to hear when they listen to each show.
Originally, I started out with just one show back in December, and it was just called Chuck Chat. The premise was it was going to be kind of an audio blog with a tech slant on it. And then techpodcast.com came along, and I was an early member of that. And they said, I always had this problem, though, as I was going through January, February, March, and even into April. I never really felt like I fit the mold. And there were even a few comments going back and forth in some of the mailing lists about people who have some tech in their show, but the rest wasn't very techy. And I sort of took that as a personal hit, even though they would always deny it. I would break it into 2 shows. I would have a freestyle show, which was the family, the fun, the sound seeing tours, the interviews with the kids, that kind of thing. That was all freestyle stuff. Whatever I wanted went on that show. And if I had a tech thought during the day or an experience I wanted to relay to, or a listener email that had to do with podcasting or computers or internet, whatever, that would go in Technorama and we'd slant that way. So twice a week I do each show, so I'm busy 4 nights a week producing. Technorama is done with my co-host Craig Stepp. He's in North Carolina. We get on a Skype call. We have a wiki page that develops over a few days, and we feed off of that script about topics we're going to talk about, skits we do. We have a lot of fun with that one. It's supposed to stay at 30 minutes, but we've run it up as high as 50, 55, I think, was the longest one. The freestyle show generally hangs between 20 and 30 minutes.
When I was listening to some of your shows, I noticed you have your Geek High Five 101.
Oh, the binary high five at the end, yes.
And it reminded me, I once was driving behind a car here in Kansas many years ago, and the license plate was 100101. And I went, oh, that's so cool. and the person I was with at the time, she's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, it's 69 in binary. And she's like, oh, you're such a geek. I'm like, yeah. So I was like really jealous. I was like, I wanted that license plate. But to your point, you mentioned on the other show recently, you got podcasts for Wisconsin. I've got podcasts for Kansas.
You do?
Yes. But here's a sad story. We moved here at the end of April, moved back to Kansas. So I'm like, oh, cool. I got to get a new license plate. I know what I'm getting because I know no one else has asked for it yet. So I go into there, and I'm like, okay, crossing my fingers, hoping that no one's gotten it yet. And I go, yeah, I want podcast. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's available. Great. I'm like, yes. I'm like thinking, okay, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I'm like, how long will that be? And she goes, well, your renewal is November. You'll get it in November. So I have to wait from May till November to get the plate.
At least it's locked in, right? I was hanging on pins and needles because I came up with the idea in April. I emailed the DMV a couple of times, said, is this taken? They don't have any web form to see what's taken. So you send them an email, 2 days later you get back and go, okay, that's available. I get the paperwork, I send it in, and the day after I sent it in, I called the lady at the DMV and I said, I forgot to put in my current registration number. And she went, oh, I'll try to take care of that. And you hear her say, hold on. And she comes back huffing and puffing like she walked 10 feet, but she weighs 500 pounds. And she gets back and she said, oh, did you put the VIN, the vehicle identification number on? I said, yes. Oh, we can cross-reference that. No problem, no problem. 4 weeks later, I get the paperwork back. It says, you forgot the previous registration number. I went, lady, you told me you were going to take care of that. So now, meanwhile, I still have no lock on the tag. I don't have podcast yet. I'm going, this is getting more popular. Someone's going to get this. I didn't leak any information.
I'm surprised Dawn and Drew didn't beat you to the punch.
Well, there are strange surprises in this world, aren't there? Kind of gloating about this one. So I got the piece of paper now that says, you've got the tag, but I don't have the stamped metal yet, so the prisoners have to get to work.
Someone in Arizona was the first one to do a podcast license plate back, I think it was in February or March. I remember seeing that someone just put a picture up on the internet of their podcast license plate from Arizona.
Well, that would be an interesting site. See how many of those you can collect.
How many different states do already people have podcasts for the license plate? So it would be interesting. I'm sure all 50 will be done soon, after this airs, for sure.
The idea has been out, but we're locked in.
Yeah. I got Kansas, and that's all I care about. And it'll be podcast with a buffalo in the background. It's a new plate. Actually, it looks pretty cool. What can listeners look forward to in the future on your show? What's coming up? What are some of the features you plan on adding or doing?
Coming up on Technorama, we are looking to tie in a few interviews with various technology people, scientists, looking to get some interviews, one-on-ones with notable people. We've also got some skits that are in the work. Last week we introduced a character named Lenny at Tech Support, so we'll probably be calling Lenny from time to time. We've got more geek thoughts from Craig in the works. The other thing, I just picked up an iRiver a week or so ago after a lot of humming and hawing, and we'll be getting more portable recording on probably both shows.
Tell our listeners where to locate your podcast and website.
My podcast and website is at www.chuckchat.com.
Now, talking about updates, what's with the Chicken Chat logo?
What I had intended, I employed Johnny B when I was at the podcaster meetup in Minnesota back in June. We started talking, and he said, well, I can help you with a new logo, because I really didn't have anything that was defined as Chuck Chat. I had my picture on the front page before, and I said, I need something that when people see it on the Cafe Press garb, they'll go, oh, that's Chuck Chat. And I had intended it to be more of an OK sign with the using your left hand. I figured the hand is a very recognizable thing for anybody. I said, now, make the OK with the forefinger and the thumb, open it up and make a C.
Yeah, but it looks like you've got Foghorn Leghorn trying to eat your name.
The outcome of that is we've got a free mascot. I mean, Craig is going around about once a week. He sends me a picture of a rooster or something. We've got a mascot of a rooster now. So That's our deranged rooster icon. But you got to admit, it's recognizable now.
So you're on a Mac. You said you're on Mac software and hardware. What microphone are you using?
I started out with a boom microphone, then I moved up to a cheap Radio Shack, and I think it was in the same May time frame that I got the mixer. I asked Michael from the Dragon page because he said, hey, we just upgraded our microphones. We've got a couple of MXL 990s. And I said, I really need a condenser microphone. I asked him if he wanted to sell them, and he said, no, after thinking about it, we're going to keep it for the co-hosts that are in the show, Summer and Joe. That way they get an upgrade too. So I didn't buy that, but he did correspond with me a bit. And said, the one you really want to get, for the bang for the buck, is the Audio-Technica AT2020. So I did some shopping around, looked on eBay, and somebody was selling it really cheap. I got a heck of a deal. It was like $86 with shipping.
Wow.
So I picked up that, and that's what I've been doing most of the recording on lately, and it seems to be very nice.
I gotta bug you on Battlestar Galactica, like I mentioned earlier. And if you have time to play golf, you have time to watch Battlestar Galactica once, and then and have it recorded, and then watch it again the second time and listen to the director's cut commentary from Ronald Moore. It's only 2 hours of your time. God.
I saw Battlestar Galactica when I was in Scotland back in December, and they were a season ahead of us, so I was completely lost. Since podcasting started up as soon as I got back from Scotland, basically, I haven't had the time. I mean, podcasting is eating things up. Golf, I've already paid for, and the golf season around here is really short, so you gotta squeeze that in. I can't get rid of my golf because there are a few things that I am passionate about other than podcasting. It's golf, downhill skiing, and anything related to technology. And there's the family, too. And I'm not putting those in any order.
My outside activity now is playing poker, but at least I can bring my iPod with me, and I listen to podcasts while I'm there, so I'm actually getting my work done while I'm playing poker.
It's a crazy balance that when you're not listening to podcasts, it seems like I'm producing podcasts, and when I'm producing, I'm not listening. So right now, as we've been talking, I've probably got about 3 more shows that piled up, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to listen to them. I get this guilt trip about not listening right now.
Other than doing what you're passionate about, what advice would you like to offer to someone looking at starting a podcast?
I've listened to your shows for the past few months, and I agree with just about everything everybody else has said. I know it sounds like a cop-out, but you're right. Do what you're passionate about.
The one I said don't say.
I glossed over it.
Don't touch this key. This key?
Don't touch anything, but leave the OK button up there for me. You know what I'm going to touch. Be prepared to spend time. If you're going to do this, and if you're going to go nuts over it, like most of us have, you're going to spend more time than you think. I think that the rule of thumb is for every 1 hour of show, you're going to spend 5 times that much producing it. Pre-production, post-production, uploading, web page, the whole thing. So be prepared to spend time, and a whole lot of it, and maybe more. It's sort of the old college rule. You know, you go to class for an hour or 2 hours a week, but you're going to spend a whole lot more time studying. Be prepared to spend some money you don't think you already had. I mean, even families on a tight budget. The funny thing is you don't need to spend a whole lot of money, but you will want to spend more money.
It's a hobby. Of course you will.
The audio quality will never be what you really want it to be. There's always going to be that next upgrade to the mixer or the microphone that you're thinking about upgrading. I've got a wish list pretty long right now, and I've got the system pretty stable now that I've got the iRiver. I've got it to where I wanted it a few months ago, so I've got to work it out and find out what the shortcomings are. But as I use it, new gadgets are going to come out, new things, and the cha-ching in the eyeballs is going to start going again, wishing I had a bigger iRiver or an iPod mixer. I saw one the other day where you can plug in 2 iPods and mix and fade between them. I said, ooh, that would be neat, but I don't have any money right now. I've already broke the bank on that. So be prepared to spend money, be prepared to spend time.
That's good advice. Thank you. Chuck, thank you for being part of the show.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, folks, that concludes our interview with Chuck Tomasi from the Chuck Chat podcast. Please check them out at chuckchat.com. Thanks again, Chuck, for coming on the show. At the end of today's podcast, we'll be playing a promo from the Word Nerd, so please stick around for that. On our next podcast, we'll be interviewing Ron Stevens from the AwareTech and Python 411 podcasts, so please come back for those. If you have any audio comments you'd like to leave us, our audio line is 206-666-HELP, or you can send audio comments or email comments to podcast411@gmail.com. We'll always love to get your feedback. Well, Well, that's going to do it for us this time. As always, I'm your host, Rob, from Podcast 411, reminding you to listen different.
You're such a nerd!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Word Nerds, a weekly program about words, language, and why we say the things we do. Brought to you every weekend from just outside Washington, D.C., the capital of obfuscation and acronym. My name is Dave Shepard, and I'm the producer of The Word Nerds. Every weekend, I and my fellow nerds bring you a half-hour podcast about the way we use the English language in everyday life. All three of us nerds are high school language teachers. I teach German in public school in the Washington, D.C. suburbs. My colleague Howard Chang teaches Latin with me in the same school district. And my brother Howard Shepard teaches English in Asheville, North Carolina. We all have a lifelong love of language, and we try to share that fascination with you each week. We talk about everything from the language of love to the language of hostility and war, from ancient vulgarities to the most recent ways of talking about technology. Since we're interested in the way people really talk, every week we feature a rude word of the week. Yes, they're all rude words, but no, only some of them are dirty words. We also feature some of our favorite new music by independent artists from PodSafe sources, such as GarageBand.com and the PodSafe Music Network. Our listeners around the world give us great insights into English from the point of view of their own languages, and we want you to be a part of that conversation as well. So please check out The Word Nerds. Go to our website, thewordnerds.org or thewordnerds.net, or do a search in the iTunes Music Store podcast section. Just look for Word Nerds. Come on, we know you're a secret word nerd. Go ahead, be a nerd and be proud of it.